Well, thank you. And everyone, that was Kayla Savage. Kayla is the division director for community development at the Department of Commerce. And so we are a cohesive team effort here. And I am although the newest member, it feels like home. So as Stanley mentioned, I am overseeing this particular grant initiative. And just like Stanley, I've waited years to have the opportunity to stand here and say, we are excited to have a state funded program to help bridge the divide in Kansas. So thank you again for joining us. If you would please enter into the chat your name and the business or company that you are with. So that we know who actually attended today. That would be really helpful. And to start, as Stanley mentioned, we're going to give you a really as broad an overview and as deep as we can get to today. If necessary, we'll do another session. But we just want you to know that it's important for all of us as a collective in our state to have this opportunity and to help start to bridge the divide that we want to address in the state. What we're going to do today is provide you the overview of the opportunity, give you a sense of what's involved in the process, what is included in the application, and how to submit, and some of those key dates and details that you need to know to have a successful application. So that's, in a nutshell, what we're going to accomplish today. We are all now used to virtual meetings. So just know that, as Kayla mentioned, we're going to have around 100 or so folks on this conference. So it's a little difficult to be super interactive with that many people. We will be posting the webinar on our website and want to answer as many questions as we can. So please leverage the chat. And we do ask that you'd hold your verbal questions until the end when we have an opportunity to hit that. So one of the things that you'll hear as a consistent theme throughout this session is that so many of the resources and templates and links to everything that we're discussing today are available on that Broadband Acceleration Grant website. There is a link on this slide. These slides will also be posted so you have access to them. But I do want to just very quickly give you a sense of that website. So let me share that with you here. There you go. The website is up, specifically addresses many of the things we're going to discuss today. In terms of qualification eligibility, which we will go through. I just want you to see what all is on the website here. The intent to apply is up, and the acceleration grant program link where you would actually submit is up, along with a host of other resources that you can use in the development of your application and even planning discussions in your application. So know that those things are all posted and available right now. So with that, let's get into some of the meat of this application. As Stanley mentioned, I've mentioned, we are trying to bridge the digital divide. This is round one of a 10-year grant program that we are starting with investments in projects that are scalable, solid investments in the future in Kansas, and that will be installed and operational by the end of February 2022. One thing to note up front is that as part of the commitment the grantees make in the process is to offer the service and pricing levels proposed for that project for 3 years after the grant ends. And you also obviously commit to help advance these investment and best practices as part of our extended broadband family. So this program, we have $5 million in funding, as Stanley mentioned. We are, sorry, I had to swallow there. The grant will fund up to $1 million with the 50% match required by the grantee. And we are addressing those priority areas of unserved, specific economically distressed areas in our state, and areas with a compelling need, which is something that the applicant would justify in their application.
Hey, Melinda, real quick. Oops.
Yes.
Just to make sure, because I know it'll end up being a question on the previous slide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the things that we had a lot of questions about, and as we got started with our previous program, was how to calculate that contribution for the match. And what the easiest way to think about it in this case, the maximum amount of the award, as Melinda said, is $1 million. What that means is the maximum project size for us would be $2 million. If you have a $2 million project, the award maximum would be $1 million. So if you had a $500,000 project, you would be required to have half of that, or $250,000. That's essentially how it works. And that, again, we had that question come up quite a bit from potential awardees. So I just wanted to emphasize that point. Thanks, Melinda.
You bet. Thank you, Stan. All right, here are some key dates for you to mark on your calendars. The application window has opened as of Monday. Yes. Yeah. And it will close January 7th. Again, mark your calendar. The intent to apply, that is a hyperlink and it is on the website. The intent is simply letting us know so that we can gear up administratively for what's to come in terms of applications, so that we can gear up for the review process, a public comment process. It doesn't eliminate you if you don't submit that. It just helps us get a handle on what the interest is and what the anticipated workload will be. So we really appreciate you submitting that for us. There is a evaluation period for the projects, January 11th to the February 16th, as well as a public comment period, which we'll discuss a little bit later in more detail. Interviews, we do intend to interview the final applicants, potential awardees, February 17th and 18th. So we appreciate it if you would hold those dates as well. And then we intend to announce awards the end of February on the 25th. So who is eligible? So this is very similar to our the last program that we offered, the surge grants. Political subdivisions, municipalities, corporations, anyone on this list is eligible to apply as long as they are authorized in the state to provide broadband services. So what is eligible? Primarily capital expenditures associated with these construction and builds. We specifically have incorporated middle mile only if it's a requirement for that last mile infrastructure build. So, so if it cannot just be middle mile, it has to be middle mile and last mile. So we mentioned priorities earlier, and this gives you a little bit more information on what we consider those priority areas. There are links for economically distressed areas as well. So if you're not sure if an area is specifically identified as economically distressed, you can look at statsamerica.org for that definition. And then we have identified that the service areas do not have to be contiguous. So if there are areas that you want to address that are more than 10 miles apart, we need to just have a justification there. So the first thing on the list is unserved, and I saved that for last because I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that this is the definition. It's intended to include the designated geographic areas where there are households without fixed terrestrial broadband at 25 down and 3 up. Stanley, do you have any more comments on that?
Yeah, that's the main point there is the 25.3 is our residential definition, and we recognize that there may be inadequate services that may or may not necessarily revolve around a residential definition. What we're emphasizing more than anything else, and I know a lot of you are familiar, is the intent of the program, and therefore the intent of the program is to address unserved and areas that are in need, obviously, as Melinda is pointing out. Ultimately, what you need to do is be able to demonstrate to us that there is a true need, whether this is the obvious minimum threshold, but if there are other elements that you think need to be considered, we're really trying to do a good job of making sure we listen to what communities are telling us and kind of boots on the ground point of view, if you will. But these are minimum threshold definitions that we're talking about.
Thank you very much. So obviously, these are complicated at times considerations in terms of areas that are ineligible. And right now we have designated areas that have already received those connectivity emergency response grants through the Sparks program called SURGE that are ineligible, and areas that are awarded USDA grants, including Reconnect. So right now, those are some of the areas that we would consider ineligible.
And can I just briefly add there, Melinda?
Yes, please.
And kind of to keep it simple, and in terms of understanding what's happening here, all this really means we're not trying to provide duplication of funds, right? So if an area has already been allocated funds, it wouldn't make sense to apply for this grant. Now, one of the questions that came up was related to RDOF, which is active right now. That because it's not finalized, we would not necessarily exclude that from consideration. We also, there are a couple of pieces to that, because again, I know there will be some questions on that. We're gonna try to get a little bit better handle from the FCC around their timeline and their requirements. But essentially, you can't go wrong if you understand that we are not funding an area that already has committed funds to build out. That's the principle that's at issue here.
That's right. That's right. And just that's another compelling reason that we wanted to build in the public comment piece, right? So we don't see these as separate challenges, but we want to make sure that the investment in the state that we make in our state is justified and is not an overbuild. So there are also suggestions in here for determinations for service. And we are really encouraging applicants to make the case, right? So there are a lot of data points and opportunities for applicants to provide data that show where there is service, where there is a compelling need. And we've outlined different mechanisms that applicants can potentially do that. We would really like for you to make the case for us. We all realize some of the pitfalls and or challenges of just using the FCC Form 477 data. There's time lags and sometimes not specific information that we all could use. So we want you to give us your most compelling data and cases for why your project should be funded. And here is a list, and there are resources on our website that get at some of the information that could be provided, whether that's survey data from local communities, whether that is some type of provider information from current service providers showing that they don't serve a specific address, or even testimonial letters from communities and the constituents that you are proposing to serve. We would encourage you, especially service providers, to work collaboratively within your community, to engage community leaders, to engage the communities that you are looking at projects for, and have them partner with you on that effort. So you'll submit an application. We will post the application, not the entire application, but we will post a project proposal and along with a proposed service area map for public comment. You can see the turnaround time is fairly short. So what we have done in the context of the application submission is we have broken out specifically what we will post publicly, so that you can submit a project proposal that is public and a service area map for the proposed project that is also designated to be posted publicly. And we will post those two items on our website for every applicant. We will post those online, and then there will be a process for folks to comment on those. There'll be a link on our website that you can do that. Applicants then will have an opportunity to respond to any comments that the department receives. And so we will have that process as well. Obviously, there's a real desire for transparency and to make sure that we are investing taxpayer funds in the most responsible and strategic way possible. So as we do this, know that we are committed to the comment period, to gathering those comments, to ensuring that we have an opportunity for people to respond, and then have an opportunity for those that are involved to respond back. We may be reaching out to applicants, we may be reaching out to commentors. We do see the burden of the comments. We want the burden to be on the commentor. If there is a case to be made about why we should not fund this project, we really need data and specifics about that. Anything to add on this one, Stan?
Yeah, no, I think just the main thing here is, not to come across as kind of, frowning on anything. It's just the principle we want to be clear is what we're trying to accomplish is to make sure we're directing the resources in the right place. One of the things that I know from discussions with the Lieutenant Governor and the Office of Prosperity, for example, is that they're consistently hearing, and particularly in some of these rural communities, inadequate access. There's a problem here, there's a problem there. So what this is baked into our plan is to make sure that we have a way for the community to get specific about where those areas are so that we can do something about it, right? So we're trying to address the concern, and we're also trying to be judicious in our stewardship of the dollar. So if there's a need and you know about a need and you're trying to get it addressed, that's what this is for. I also wanted to mention, Melinda, real briefly, and you may have mentioned it, I might have just lost track, but in terms of the target audience for this is designed to encourage to apply, it would be service providers and local communities or public-private partnerships between the two, right? So one of the things, regardless of who the applicant is, you will have to demonstrate the ability to execute the plan, right? You're going to need to know how to deploy whatever it is you're proposing to deploy. So, you know, the public comment period, we're really excited about this being a component of it based on our lessons learned, and feel good that this will create the avenue that we need to make sure that we are able to be responsive to the community and to interested stakeholders, as the case may be. So, you know, my fingers are crossed, Melinda, that we don't get an avalanche, but, you know, and I think we may have some kind of parameters that, you know, a 100-page dissertation would not be helpful for us. I guess I'll leave it at that.
True. So here's a few more comments about the public comments, just that we will be sharing those. We do reserve the right to post them, and some of the other detail. So key application dates. I already mentioned the window and the intent to apply. I want to just reiterate, we haven't done the applicant interview piece before, but that is going to be a really important part of the process to awards. You know, it's one thing to get an application on paper and a technical proposal. It's a whole nother thing to hear the story from the applicants, potential applicants, about the project and all the partners that are involved in that project. So Stanley mentioned the public-private partnerships. That is key. We would also encourage the key partners to be part of that applicant interview so that we can make sure that we really have the whole picture as we try to make the final awards. So I did mention that the portal is open. I showed you that on the website. I would encourage you to get on this website and pull some of these key documents down that you'll be able to use for developing your application, and just get in the portal. You'll need to log in. You'll create a login and have an opportunity to see the form, the online form that we've opened up and developed for you to submit applications. Now, trying to drill down into all the different sections of what we have asked for in terms of information to be submitted for the program will far extend the time that we have today. But here's a quick overview of what is within each of the application sections. There are primarily 3 sections. There's a project proposal, which you could say is the business case, the technical project plan, which are all the technical documents, the engineering documents that would be submitted with that, and then a budget piece. So those are the primary sections. And those things that are highlighted in yellow, I just wanted to draw your attention to. Obviously, we've mentioned the publicly posted documents already, but there will be 2 documents within the application that are posted online. We very much want you to identify those as public information, and we are not requiring or asking that you submit anything within those 2 documents that would be publicly identifiable information or proprietary to your company. So please note that. And then on the project maps, oh, Stanley, do you want to add something there?
No, I think I think I might have stepped on the very point you're about to make. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Well, equally important on the project maps and the technical plan, we would like for you very much to identify any proprietary or private documents as that. We have had some open records requests for different things, and we want to make sure that we do our due diligence. So please mark private documents private.
And then let's talk about that just for a second more, Melinda. We want to be, again, there's a recurring theme here, practicality. Um, if there is proprietary information, you need to make it clear in your application. And it don't want to be, we don't want that to be taken frivolously, because we're government and we endeavor to be transparent in what we're doing. We also recognize that there are needs for some proprietary and confidential information to be submitted in order for us to be able to evaluate properly your application. So one example would be on the maps. The maps is really important for us because we need a visual depiction of where it is you're proposing to provide connectivity. If in your judgment, you think it's more, it would be helpful to submit a map that you want to label proprietary, not to be made public, and we know that there are cases like that, and understand that and not trying to dispute that. That's fine. You still have to provide us something that shows the geographically where you're proposing service, such that someone else can look at that and go, oh, okay, yeah, I've got service there already. So in our public comment period, you can let us know. Again, our goal is to keep this as simple as possible. And we really want, I recognize this can be tricky, but you know, and there was a point not too long ago, I didn't know what a KMZ file or KML file was. I am painfully aware of it now. So, but I know that those of you who are in the industry of providing service, I know that you probably already well aware of those, just as you are well aware of what a network architecture plan is. So again, the point is we need to have something that we can make public. If we don't get it, we'll probably be coming back to you and saying, where is it? Or we'll just, you know, again, not consider your application. We wouldn't want to have that happen. So anyway, just you can't tell Melinda, I really am a fan of KISS. Let's keep it simple, but I wanted to make sure everyone understood. We recognize that proprietary issue, but we do have a need for this from the application process.
Thank you.
Dan and Melinda, if I can jump in real quick here, just so that everyone knows that there are specific naming conventions that have been noted in the technical planning guide and also in the application itself. So it's very clear what is public and what is private. And we need your help in making sure that those documents, those uploads that you submit, use that naming convention so that as our team is reviewing your documents, that those are considered that way. So the naming conventions are specifically called out on every single one of these uploads. So if you have questions about that, reach out to Melinda, but it is noted there as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Kayla. Thanks, Dan. And one additional note, the file uploads, our submission portal does not like KMZ or KML files. So there are multiple places within the application process that we do ask you to zip those files together and upload them, or even upload, it could be a single KMZ file as a zip file, but that is why. And those are core to your application. As Stanley mentioned, it's a fine balance to strike with asking for too much technical information beyond what would be reasonably considered in the planning stage, with us trying to figure out what the best project is to fund. So it is something that we are strongly committed to keeping as simple as we can, yet making the best decisions that we can. So thanks for your work, and absolutely reach out if you have questions as you go. So let's talk a little bit.
Hi, this is Jenny Lucas Brown. I just want to remind everybody that you can submit questions in the chat as we go, and we'll be collecting those for Stanley and Melinda to answer at the end.
Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
All right, so let's talk just a little bit about the funding components. We've already talked about the up to $1 million grant and the 50% matching requirement. There is a requirement within the portal for applicants to upload a letter that validates that they are able to do the 50% match. And we also want to make sure that you're aware that there is an in-kind option within the 50% match, that we've allowed up to 50% of the matching requirement to be in kind. However, we do want to reserve approval rights to that and are asking that you send specific and very clear documentation on the things that you are proposing as an in-kind match, as well as the calculations, if there's some kind of prorated or cost allocated calculation that needs to occur. So we have learned some very clear lessons through this last federal Sparks grant with the in-kind, and we want to recognize the value of some of the in-kind matches that you all may bring to the table, because those are absolutely valid ways to help support the funding, and we know that those things cost money. So we want to provide that opportunity in a way that's reasonable and that we can hopefully get to some best practices. We do have some guidance documents on in-kind, and Kayla, you have helped to do some of that work. Do you have anything to add on the in-kind?
Yes, so we do have an in-kind guidance document that will be available on our website here very shortly. And there is a list of qualified and eligible costs for that. That's very specific and also talks about how to value those. As Melinda already mentioned, the documentation of those items, those eligible costs, and then also uploading that documentation with your application for consideration is what's most important about in-kind. Again, up to half, we're allowing up to half of the in-kind, or up to half of the matching requirement being eligible for in-kind. But again, those are verifiable in-kind costs that are specific to the project. So the applicant is going to need to make a case to us to make sure that we are clear on what those costs are that are specific to the project. And again, back to making sure that dollars are being invested the best way possible. Make the case to us why these in-kind costs are of benefit for us to approve for this program. So the guidance on that, there's about 3 pages of it. And like I said, it will be up on the website here very shortly. And if you have more questions about that, you can reach out to me directly, or you can also reach out to Melinda or Stan as well. Any of us on the team can help with that. If you would like us to review something ahead of you submitting an application, you may do that as well. In fact, would encourage that. Also just want to mention here, for the benefit of those of you who put together an application for Surge or the adoption program, we have changed our online platform so that you now have the ability to actually create an account and start a draft application and save the progress on your application, and then also sign back in. Another great benefit is you can actually also have collaborators on your application as well. So if the person putting together part of the application is not the technical or certified engineer, and that person needs to provide their own content for the application, you can actually invite them to collaborate on this portal or this application tool that we have. So great improvement from Surge, and If you guys have any feedback for us on that, please let us know. But hopefully that will also help you all be able to put together a more robust application as well. Just wanted to mention that here. Hopefully that fits, Melinda.
You bet. So there's also a budget template that's available on the website. And that template is identified as fiber or wireless. So there are two options for the template. And the wireless template does have a backhaul section. So if you're doing a project that has fiber backhaul for wireless, that's the wireless budget template. So obviously it's one of the common themes you've heard today is to create a strong project for us. And that for us will equal a wise investment. Some of the things that I really want to emphasize are to engage with your community, and that public-private partnership piece is really a priority, and engaging community anchors, not only engaging them, but having them be a partner and submitting letters of support will, in our opinion, help solidify the strength of the project. So that, along with making a compelling case within the application itself of why should we fund your project over somebody else's, the more data that you can provide to make the case, the better. So I would encourage you to do those things and strategically help shape our strategic view of what you are trying to accomplish and why it is good for the community and the state to invest in the project. Stanley, do you have anything to add, Kayla?
I thought that was said perfectly. Thank you.
So finally, some tips. The key tips, you've heard several already. The submission portal is a really great improvement. The portal itself will allow you to stop and start, as Kayla mentioned, as well as engage with others within your organization. Those types of things for this type of a complex application are huge. So we hope that you will find that to be a real benefit as you go. Leverage every template and resource, especially the technical planning guide. That technical planning guide you can pull, and it goes through nearly every piece of information that we are going to ask for on the portal. That will be key in helping you understand the flow of the application submission, as well as every naming convention and file type option associated with what we are asking for. So we ask that you specifically pay attention to those things. So I think that we are at a point where we can open it up for some questions. So I know that there's a lot of information to cover, but we would be happy to answer questions. If you want to, you'll need to
You just answered one of them in the chat box I see, Melinda, which was whether or not the slides will be posted online right there. So that's good.
Yep, so it looks like we've just got a few questions that have been submitted so far. So thank you guys, and keep dropping those on the chat box. We do have, we have about 15 more minutes. Just to remind everyone, this session is recorded. Will also be available on our website with the slides, with the recording. As I mentioned, timing of that will hinge on getting the recording from the cloud and then getting that on our website. So it could be as soon as Friday, but it could be as maybe as late as early next week. But we will work fast and diligently to get this posted as soon as possible. And it will be posted on the Broadband Acceleration Grant website. So that specific website there. Again, you can find that under the KDC website, community programs, and then it's under community programs, broadband acceleration grant program. Let's see here. Devin asked a question, Stan, about the RDOF related, and I know you made a couple comments about this, so we'll ask it here, and it might be something that we need to come back to, Devin. If an unserved area was assigned in the RDOF, but funds are not yet committed, as we talked about, will this alone reduce the chances of a grant being approved?
Yeah, right. So thanks for the question. No, it will not. We want to do some additional homework because this is a real-time issue with that process being, this is the first year of RDOF. And we want to make sure that we've got it right. But no, the intention is not to exclude on the probability of some other funding coming into place. We're trying to stay out of that game so we don't put ourselves in a bad spot. Now, having said that, if you have an RDOF, and I know there's a quiet period, so even if you did, you probably couldn't say here. But if you are getting RDOF funds, you wouldn't be able to get RDOF and our funds for the same project, right? So I think there's a little bit of kind of strategic planning on the part of the applicants to make determination as to how they want to proceed, one versus the other potentially. But we are not biased by how you want to do that. What we're biased in favor of is accelerating deployment of broadband connectivity, obviously. So like I said, I will be doing some outreach to our colleagues at the FCC with a couple of specific questions that we have relative to what they're planning and their timeline and what the implications may be. And I also know that from talking to colleagues in other states that this is a recurring question that comes up. So so it's on our radar. I am looking into it a little bit further to make sure we've got this lined up right, but that's right now, that's the direction we're headed.
Stan, can I add one comment there? And that would be, if you are a recipient of an RDOF grant and you have concerns about a project that is proposed, we also encourage you to participate in the public comment piece, because we have available to us the public data that gets posted on these projects, any pending project. So if there is more specific information that you as a recipient of another grant or anything related to what gets publicly posted, we would encourage comments to that effect to help flush out some of these situations that are, in the process, because we like you have access to what gets posted publicly. And so just encourage you to make comments if there are concerns.
Thanks, Melinda. Katla, I think is how that name is said. She asked the question if are the scoring metrics available for competing or overlapping project requests?
I think that's Carla. If I recognize that, I may be wrong. So we do not have that available yet. We are going to put some guidelines out in general. It may be, Melinda, correct me, because it may be already in the material you put together.
It's not yet.
So,
we're in the work.
Yeah, we've been, obviously this is we're putting a lot together, and we're also we're doing a few tweaks based on the lessons learned from the previous program.
I can say that the scoring mechanisms would be directly related to the content that has already been published. So our scoring will be associated with what we're asking for in the content of the submission and related to the priorities that we've outlined, whether it's unserved, economically distressed, or underserved. So for example, if you are working on an application for an underserved area or an area of compelling need, the more data that you provide making the case of why that is an area of compelling need will be related in a score associated with that justification.
Yeah, so, and that goes directly to the question Nick is asking about the definition of underserved. The reality is we're intentionally not trying to put that as the narrow definition, which is totally up for a lot of debate. I personally am not a fan of that phrase because it's in the eye of the beholder what underserved means. For our purposes, we are looking for demonstrated need, and we are stressing to applicants that they should know what that is, such that they can apply and allow us to look at it objectively and go, yep, that's where we can make impact. So it's not going to be a rigorous, I mean, a lot of you all will know about the ins and outs, the intricacies, the pros and cons of data from the Form 477, which map, that map. What I'm stressing to you is demonstrated need, and we're giving you the flexibility to do that to an extent, right? And we saw some really good examples of that with our previous program, with our surge pandemic response grant. There was a really good example. Let me just share this because it may be helpful. A really good example of demonstrating the need outside of the Form 477 data set, right? Was the applicant went out and did a survey of households and asked for a series of questions. It wasn't too many questions, but it was a handful of questions about what their actual experiences were. And they were able to provide it to us. It was a little voluminous, but it was sufficient to make it clear that there was a real need. So that's just an example. We're not requiring you to do one way or the other. What we are saying to you is, you know your communities, you know where the needs are. Help us help you by making the case so that it's not a question.
Yeah.
I think this is the way to go, and we're open to feedback, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. Let's see here.
If I could add one comment while you're queuing up the next question. We have and will consistently get phone calls from constituents, folks that are most often living on the suburban fringe of a community that are in the gap. They don't have access. They're concerned about access. They've had multiple wireless access providers or what have you, but those sections, no matter how they are represented on the Form 477, are areas of compelling need when we hear consistently from business owners and households that they don't have access, especially in the pandemic has indeed risen and lifted the veil on a lot of these gaps. So I would encourage you again to work with community, the local community and community leaders to help solve some of those problems. We are not granting funding to individuals in this program, but we hope that some of the funding will help solve some of those problems.
Right. There's a couple of other questions I see here. One of them is going to be on distressed. Well, actually, let me back up. There's and I don't want to mispronounce names here. Jacques. The question here, there's 3 questions and they all look like very good questions. Pardon my failure to pronounce names here. The first question is regarding multiple applications or versus a single application. And we had this question come up before. We wanted, as you are hearing from us, we're focused on community impact, so we want you to put together projects that are able to articulate a benefit to a community in some manner. So that's if you want a guide for how to think about your application, it's probably that. We do allow for the non-contiguous piece of it. The reason we'd make that distinction is because we want you to, we're trying to be open, but you just need to explain that as it relates to the community impact, the community benefit. Some way or another, that needs to be understandable or articulable, if you will. So you can apply, you can make multiple applications or single applications using your judgment in that context. I think is probably the best way to answer the question.
And I would just associate that in the portal and on the application submission, we do ask for your organization name and a geographic identifier consistently throughout throughout the application. So for example, if we were going to have someone apply for a specific county, we would want your business name, Stanley Technologies, Shawnee County, or some city or some other geographic identifier to help us distinguish the projects for your organization.
You know, Melinda, that reminds me of, it may be helpful here. We had an example where the applicant in the previous program had a kind of a broad definition of, well, we had examples where an applicant said they could cover the entire state. We've had applicants that do what we can just cover the entire county because it's wireless and it's going to cover everywhere. So neither of those applicants were successful, interesting to note, but not specifically for that reason, but because the proposal was for unproven technology, for example. So, you know, again, you know, we're trying to, you know, be fairly direct in what we're trying to accomplish. So I would probably just leave it at that in terms of guidance. There are two more questions from the same person. Let me just try to touch on those. The letter of intent, Melinda, the question, and I'll let you answer. There was a question of how detailed does the letter of intent need to be?
There's a few form fields. We basically ask for some demographic information, excuse me, the proposed project area, and an anticipated grant amount. I don't think it gets much more detailed than that. It's fairly.
And can the amount change if they start out with an estimate and then as they do their engineering?
Yeah, it's non-committal. It just gives us a sense of what we might be looking at from both a funding perspective and an administrative overhead perspective. You bet. It can change. It is not committal. You don't have to assume that you have to adhere to that.
Right. There was another question along the same lines here regarding pricing, and would it be based on FCC's reasonable comparability benchmark? We had not nailed down, I'm familiar with that one. We had not intended to use that, but that may end up being, that's a great question. The intention is for price to be, intention is for the pricing. We're doing our part to make sure that there's not price gouging of any manner without being the pricing police. So we will, let me just leave it at a stay tuned. We've got to put our heads, we have to wrap our heads right around it, the easiest way for us to do that. Here's what I think is a positive thing. We did not see that as an issue in our surge program. I'm very happy. I was very, very happy with what we saw there. It was, we didn't have, I don't recall any cases where we were concerned about, well, we didn't have any material concerns. And lastly.
Oh, Stan, can I make one more comment on affordability? Seeing as the Office of Broadband Development is kind of a toddler, okay. That is one of the tenets of our program, is to report on affordability, right, to the legislature or whoever we have to report to. So that is, something that is on the horizon, not only for this grant program, but also in terms of what the office itself has been tasked with. So I just want to point that out.
Great. Kayla, anything else? I'm sorry, go right ahead.
That's okay. You did great on the pricing. On the pricing question too, Jack, and for everybody on the call, that's really related to the acknowledgement that the grantee is going to, respect that pricing structure for 3 years once the funding is given, or once the funding is awarded. So that's really what that relates to. But like Stan said, we'll take a look at the FCC's definition as well and let you know if that's going to be something that's a parameter for this grant. As far as further questions, you can definitely email those to the email address that is up on the screen now, kdc_broadband@ks.gov. That gets to both Stan and Melinda, and so they can reach out with responses just as quickly as possible. We will also be, in addition to the additional resources that are posted on our website now and also later today, we will also be adding any of these FAQs as well as those come in and as those are received. Also, I think the team mentioned that if there is interest for another potential webinar, so if you've got interest in that, please reach out and let us know as well. But we will be, like I said, we will be posting this recording once it's available on our website. And one of the other questions that was asked, Nick, you asked the question about distressed community index, and it does not have to be all of those. It can be one of those. So again, make the clear indication if the community that your project is in meets one of those qualifiers, and let us know if you have questions about that specifically. And then Nick, you also asked, what are you looking for in partnerships between communities and providers? So Melinda or Stan, if you guys want to answer this, I know that my take on it has been, again, the public-private partnership. We're wanting to ensure that these dollars are invested in the best place possible. So what that could look like is partnerships between municipalities and the providers, whether that's with materials, equipment, supplies, planning resources, engineering, also just coming up with a plan for where services will be located as well. So that's my take on it. Melinda, Stan, if you guys want to jump in and take that. What are you looking for in partnerships between communities and providers? And then we will be at the end of our time.
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I appreciate you asking it. We have actually had some experience with this through this last round of surge grants. And let's just say we would much prefer to see communities engaged with service providers up front, rather than getting an application, going through an interview, and then hearing that, well, we haven't reached out to the community yet, even though we're planning to provide a connection to the courthouse or a connection to the first response center or whatever that connection is. We want to see those relationships reflected in your application. And it can also help, even as you hit construction proposals, to have that partnership with the city or the county that indicates you're going to have some support in terms of right of way or some of those other practical construction pieces that can cause, hiccups or delays. We want to see those types of partnerships established in the planning process for the application whenever possible. That doesn't mean you have to be completely comprehensive, but we certainly would hope that as you are planning projects within a community that you're talking to the city, county, and or other community anchors. So Stanley, do you have other things to add?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, if you're asking me what would get us excited just in general about an application in that regard, it's when the service provider or the proposed applicant has been in lockstep with the community as part of that community's economic development plan, right? that's the kind of thing ultimately we are in the Department of Commerce. So we have a bias in that way. But that's really the thing. It's to the more integrated and comprehensive the thought and of the project, the more we want to encourage, if not require. The other thing I wanted to touch on, I don't know if we made it, I think it comes up, but I want to put a little bit of an emphasis on it. It was one of the tenets that we are intending to maintain from our surge program. It was all about immediate impact, long-term benefit. So, and the surge, it was immediate impact because it was specifically to mitigate the pandemic. So we are even more so with this program. We're still interested, obviously, in the immediate impact, but as you note, that you have a 12-month window for construction and completion of the project, which is not the case in our other program. So it's not meant to, that's the window for you to work within. But, with that in mind, what we really are encouraging is long-term solutions. There are minimum standards of what defines broadband. We're encouraging you to produce projects that will withstand the test of time. And we recognize that technologies change, and we recognize that there are cost factors in which technology you may be proposing. We just want to stress that we place a higher value on long-term sustainability of a project. We simply are, and I know you all get this. We don't want to have to reinvest over and over again in the same community every couple of years because the technology became obsolete. And we don't have a crystal ball, but we do have some good indicators. And so keep that in mind too.
And with that, we know that these types of infrastructure opportunities for communities make a huge difference in terms of the quality of life in our state. So we cannot underestimate the impact that your work and this opportunity will have on the communities that we end up providing awards to, whether it's having the ability to work from home or whether it's the opportunity to learn remotely or do business in a new way, which we have seen across our country with the pandemic. So we are excited to have this opportunity to work with you on this grant opportunity and hope that you will submit questions and hope that we can look forward to seeing some applications. What else do you have, Stanley?
One more real quick, I meant to say this much earlier. It's a question that I'm surprised didn't come up. The application window, we are not doing a first come, first serve. So you're not gonna be at a disadvantage for applying later in the window versus earlier in the window. So feel comfortable. That's our approach, is to take all of the applications and then evaluate them.
Oh, thanks for mentioning that. In addition, you can submit it, edit it, and resubmit it before the deadline too. So even though you've submitted, you can submit over it. So.
And if you think that's going on, please give us a heads up so we don't invest a lot of time in something that we shouldn't.
All right. That's all we have. We don't have any further questions. I think we'll call this a wrap. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you all very, very much. We really appreciate you coming along with us for this exciting ride.
Thanks, everybody.